It was 3017 in the morning when I sat down on the cold tile floor of the hospital chapel and typed out the hardest message of my life. My hands were shaking. My daughter had been born 9 weeks early, 2 pounds and 4 ounces, and they had just rushed her into emergency surgery because her tiny intestines weren't working the way they were supposed to. I didn't have words for what I was feeling, so I just opened the family group chat and wrote, "Emergency surgery happening right now. She's so small. Please pray for her. Please." I hit send and I held the phone against my chest like it could hold me back together. 3 little dots appeared. My heart jumped. Someone was typing. Someone was awake. Someone cared. It was my mother-in-law. The message came through and I read it 4 times because I couldn't make sense of it. "We're at the lake house this weekend, sweetie. Terrible reception out here. Keeping you in our thoughts. Don't forget the Wexler anniversary brunch is still on for Sunday. The club confirmed our table." The Wexler anniversary brunch. My husband's parents had been planning that brunch for 2 months. Apparently, it had survived the news that their granddaughter might not survive the night. I want to tell you, I threw the phone. I didn't. I just sat there on the floor of that chapel with my back against the wall, and I waited for the surgeon to come tell me whether my baby was alive. Her name is Posey. We named her after my grandmother, the only person in my life who had ever made me feel like I was enough. She came out screaming, which the nurses told me was a miracle for a baby that early, and then she stopped screaming, and the next 11 hours were the longest of my life. She made it through the surgery. The surgeon, a tired woman with kind eyes named Dr. Okafor, sat down next to me afterward and told me my daughter was a fighter. I believed her. I had to. My husband, Sebastian, was on a flight back from a work conference in Denver when Posey was born. He landed to 40 missed calls and got to the hospital still in his rumpled travel clothes, and he held my face in his hands and cried. And for about an hour I felt like maybe we could survive this together. Then his phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. He read it and his jaw tightened and he didn't show me. I found out later what it said. His mother had written, "Don't let her drag you into being dramatic. Babies are born early all the time. Be strong for the family image right now. People are asking." People were asking. That was the part that stuck in my throat like a fishbone for weeks afterward. People were asking, and the thing my husband's family was worried about was the answer. Let me back up and tell you who these people are, because you need to understand the world I married into. Sebastian's family is old money in the kind of way that doesn't even feel like money anymore. It just feels like a force field. His grandfather built a regional bank into something enormous, and now the family name is on a hospital wing, on a community theater, on a scholarship fund, on a wing of the art museum. His mother, who I called by her first name because she made it very clear early on that mom was reserved for people who'd earned it, runs the family foundation. She has a particular gift. She can make cruelty sound like concern. She can look at you with her head tilted and her eyes soft and say something that leaves you bleeding internally for a week. When Sebastian and I got engaged, she pulled me aside at the engagement party and told me in that soft voice that she just wanted me to know there was no pressure, that she understood I came from a more modest background, and that the family had ways of doing things she was sure I'd pick up quickly. I was 26. I smiled and thanked her. I didn't understand yet that I had just been handed the rules of a game I was always going to lose. So when Posey was born and that group chat went silent, I shouldn't have been surprised. But I was, because I still believed, somewhere in the dumb, hopeful center of me, that a sick baby would be the thing that cracked them open. That blood would mean something, that a 2-pound granddaughter fighting for her life in an incubator would matter more than a brunch. I was wrong. The first week I sent updates twice a day. A photo of Posey's hand, smaller than Sebastian's thumbnail, wrapped around the tip of my pinky. An update that she'd gained an ounce. A blurry picture of her first time off the highest oxygen setting. I sent them into the silence like dropping coins into a well, listening for a splash that never came. My father-in-law would sometimes react with a thumbs up. Just the thumbs up. His granddaughter survived a blood transfusion, and he gave it a thumbs up. The same way you'd acknowledge that someone had picked up milk on the way home. Sebastian's older sister, the one who'd never once texted me directly in 4 years of marriage, posted a vacation photo from St. Bart's the same afternoon I sent the transfusion update. 2 glasses of rosé sweating on a white tablecloth, the ocean behind them. The caption needed this. I sat in the NICU parking garage in my car and I laughed until I cried, because what else was there to do? Sebastian was trying. I'll give him that. But he was also drowning, and the way he coped was to go quiet and go back to work. He had to, in a way. His job at the family bank was the only thing that felt solid to him, and we needed the insurance, and I understood that. But it meant that more and more it was just me. Me and Posey and the rotating cast of nurses who became, over those weeks, more like family than the people whose name was on the building down the street. There was a night nurse named Tomas who had a daughter of his own who'd been a preemie, and he used to talk to Posey in Spanish while he adjusted her monitors, soft and low. And one night I asked him what he was saying and he got embarrassed and told me he was telling her about the ocean. Because his daughter loved the ocean now, and he figured Posey would too someday. I'm not a person who cries easily, but I cried at that. A stranger in scrubs at 4 a.m. had more tenderness for my daughter than her own grandparents. The thing about the NICU is that time stops meaning anything. Days bleed into nights. You learn to read the monitors. You learn the difference between an alarm that means nothing and an alarm that means everything, and your whole nervous system gets rewired to live and die by a number on a screen. I stopped going home. I slept in the family lounge. I ate vending machine crackers and bad cafeteria coffee, and I lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose. I existed in a bubble of fluorescent light and beeping machines, and the impossible, enormous love I felt for this tiny person who didn't even know I existed yet. And the whole time, the silence from the family kept growing teeth. Here's where it gets bad. Here's the part I still have trouble talking about. Around week 4, I started noticing that people I knew, mutual friends, Sebastian's cousins, were treating me strangely. There was a softness in how they spoke to me that I couldn't place. A careful, walking on eggshells quality. One of his cousins, a sweet woman named Delphine, who I'd always gotten along with, texted me out of nowhere to say she was thinking of me during this difficult time, and that she hoped I was getting the rest I needed, and that it was so brave of me to keep going. Brave to keep going? The phrasing snagged on something. Why would visiting my own baby require bravery? I called Delphine. I asked her point blank what people were saying. There was a long pause, and then, in a small voice, she told me. The story going around the family was that I'd had a breakdown, that the pregnancy and birth had triggered something, a severe postpartum crisis, and that I was not well, that I was unstable, that Sebastian was handling it with such grace, and that the family had made the difficult decision to give me space because any stress could make her episode worse. The reason no one had visited the hospital, the reason no one had called, wasn't neglect. It had been reframed as mercy. They weren't ignoring me. They were protecting me from myself. And the architect of this story, the woman who had built it brick by brick, was my mother-in-law. I sat in the cafeteria with the phone pressed to my ear and I felt the floor drop out from under me. Because suddenly all of it made sense. The thumbs up, the silence, the careful softness. They hadn't forgotten about us. They had a story, a clean and tidy and reputation-friendly story, that explained why this family with their name on the hospital wing hadn't shown up for the granddaughter dying inside that very hospital. The story wasn't we couldn't be bothered. The story was the poor mother lost her mind. It was genius, honestly. It made them the heroes. It made me the cautionary tale. And it meant that if I ever spoke up, if I ever said a word about how they'd abandoned us, I'd just be proving the story right. See? She's hysterical. She's not well. Bless her heart. I didn't sleep that night. I sat next to Posey's incubator, and I watched her chest rise and fall, and I made her a promise. I told her that I was going to be okay, that we were going to be okay, that we were going to be okay, and that I was never, ever going to let those people make me feel small again. I don't know if she heard me. She was asleep, this little fighter with a feeding tube in her nose and a heart that had decided, against all odds, to keep beating. But I needed to say it out loud. The 5th week is when everything broke open. Posey was finally stable enough that Dr. Okafor started using the word home. Not yet, she said, but soon. We were talking about car seats and oxygen monitors and what life would look like. For the first time in over a month, I let myself feel something that wasn't terror. And that was the week my brother showed up. I should have mentioned him earlier. I have one brother, Eamon, 3 years older than me, and we grew up poor and scrappy and fiercely loyal to each other. He's a paramedic now in the city 2 hours north of where I live, works brutal hours, never married, the kind of person who shows up to help you move and brings his own tools. He'd been texting me the whole time, but I'd been keeping him at arm's length, partly because I didn't want him driving 4 hours round trip after 12-hour shifts, and partly, I'm ashamed to admit, because the family had spent 4 years making me feel like Eamon and I were the embarrassing relatives, the ones who didn't quite fit, and some poisonous part of me had absorbed that. But that fifth week, Eamon stopped asking permission. He just showed up at the NICU on a Tuesday afternoon with a duffel bag and a thermos of real coffee and a look on his face that told me he'd already decided he wasn't leaving. He took one look at me, at how thin I was, at the bruised-looking circles under my eyes, and his face did something complicated. Then he looked through the glass at Posey, at his niece, this scrap of a human he was meeting for the first time, and my big, tough paramedic brother who pulls people out of car wrecks for a living, put his hand against the glass and just stood there, completely silent, for a long, long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Where," he said, "is everyone?" And I told him, all of it. The group chat, the brunch, the thumbs-up reactions, the vacation photos. And then, finally, the story, the breakdown, the postpartum crisis that never happened. The careful, calculated narrative that had turned my abandonment into their mercy. I watched my brother's face go very still. Eamon doesn't get loud when he's angry. He gets quiet and focused and a little scary. He sat with it for a minute. Then he asked me a question that changed everything. "Do you have the texts?" I did. I had all of them. Every message in that group chat, time-stamped and saved. The brunch reminder sent the night of the emergency surgery. The "be strong for the family" image. Text his mother had sent Sebastian, which Sebastian, in a moment of exhausted honesty weeks earlier, had forwarded to me. The thumbs-up reactions to a baby's blood transfusion. The whole damning, undeniable record. And here is the part I'm proudest of. And I want to be honest that this was Eamon's idea, because he's smarter than people give him credit for. He didn't tell me to scream at them. He didn't tell me to make a scene. He told me to do something much, much worse. He told me to document everything, calmly and completely, and then to invite them to a celebration. Because Posey was coming home. We sent a single message to the family group chat. It was warm. It was gracious. It said that Posey had defied every expectation, that she was being discharged on Saturday, and that we wanted to have a small homecoming gathering to thank everyone for their support and prayers during this difficult time. We'd be so grateful if they could come. The replies came pouring in within minutes. Suddenly everyone was available. Suddenly the lake house in St. Bart's and the brunch club were forgotten. My mother-in-law replied first, of course, effusive, saying how she'd been praying every single day and how this was the answer to all our prayers, and how she couldn't wait to finally meet her precious granddaughter. Every single day. The woman who had invented my mental breakdown to explain her absence had been praying every single day. Eamon read that one over my shoulder and just exhaled slowly through his nose. Saturday came. We brought Posey home in a car seat that swallowed her whole, with a tiny oxygen cannula in her nose and a heart monitor clicked to her diaper, and she was perfect. She was the most perfect thing I had ever seen. We set her up in the nursery I'd painted at 2 a.m. weeks before she was born. Back when I still thought I knew how this was all going to go. By 2 p.m, our small house was full of Sebastian's family. They came with gift bags from stores I couldn't afford and flowers that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. My mother-in-law arrived in a cream-colored suit, looking like she'd stepped out of a magazine, and she swept toward Posey's bassinet with her arms outstretched in that soft, soft voice, saying, "There's my angel, there's Grandma's precious angel." And I stepped in front of the bassinet, just stepped in front of it, calmly. I didn't raise my voice. I learned that lesson well, watching her for 4 years. The quietest person in the room is the one with the power. Before everyone meets her, I said, "I want to thank you all for coming. And I want to share something with you since we're all family and family shares everything. Eamon dimmed the lights and turned on the TV. I'd put it all together the night before. Every screenshot blown up large enough to read from across the room. Time stamped. In order. The first slide was my message from the chapel floor. Emergency surgery happening right now. She's so small. Please pray for her, please. Sent at 3:17 a.m. The second slide was the reply. The lake house. The Wexler brunch. The club table confirmed. The club table confirmed. I didn't say anything. I just clicked to the next one. And the next. The thumbs up on the transfusion. The vacation photo with the timestamp matched right next to it. The brunch that went ahead anyway. The 5 weeks of silence laid out in cold, undeniable order. And then the last slide. The text from my mother-in-law to her son. Be strong for the family image right now, people are asking. The room was so quiet I could hear Posey's monitor beeping softly in the next room. My mother-in-law's face had gone the color of paper. She started to speak, started to do the thing she always did, that soft voice cranking up. Now, sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You weren't well, you have to understand. I was never sick, I said. Still quiet, still calm. There was no breakdown. There was no postpartum crisis. There was a 2-pound baby fighting for her life in a hospital with your name on the wall. And not one of you came. So you invented a story to make that okay. You made me the villain so you wouldn't have to be. I looked around the room, at the cousins staring at their shoes, at my father-in-law who couldn't meet my eyes, at Sebastian, who I'd shown all of this to the night before, and who was standing now with his jaw set beside me where he should have been all along. You're all welcome to leave, I said. And before you do, I picked up the cream-colored gift bag my mother-in-law had set down, the one I'd glanced into earlier, the one holding an envelope. I knew what was in it. A check. A large one. A let's put this behind us check, the kind his family used the way other people use apologies. I held it out to her without opening it. We don't need it, I said. We never needed your money. We needed you to show up. And you couldn't even do that for free. She didn't take it. She just stared. So I set it down on the table, gently, and I walked past her into the nursery where my daughter was sleeping. This miracle, this fighter, this little person who would grow up knowing exactly who held her and who didn't. They left. All of them, eventually, in a slow shuffle of mumbled excuses and unmet eyes. My mother-in-law was the last to go. At the door she turned, and for just a second I saw something real flicker across her face. Something that might have been shame, or might have just been the fury of a woman who'd finally lost control of the story. You'll regret this, she said softly. No, I said. I won't. And I closed the door. Sebastian and I are still figuring things out, honestly. It's not a fairy tale. He spent his whole life inside that family's gravity, and it's going to take him years to fully break free, and some days are hard. But he chose us. When it counted, he stood beside the bassinet and not behind his mother, and that's something. Eamon stayed a week. He slept on our couch and he held Posey every chance he got, and he taught her, he swore, to do her first real smile. Though I maintain it was gas. Posey is 2 now. She's wild and stubborn and obsessed with the ocean, which makes me think of Tomas the night nurse every single time. She has no idea how she came into this world. Someday I'll tell her. I'll tell her that she was small enough to fit in one hand and strong enough to outlast every single person who didn't believe she'd make it. I'll tell her that the people who matter are the ones who show up at 3 a.m., not the ones who show up for the photo. And I'll tell her the most important thing I learned, sitting on that cold chapel floor with my whole world hanging by a thread. When people show you they won't show up for you in the dark, believe them. And then go build a life so full of light that their absence becomes the kindest thing they ever gave you. For a long time after that day, I kept turning one question over in my head. How did a family with their name on a hospital wall manage to skip the one moment that actually mattered? And the answer, when I finally let myself see it, was simple. Nothing they did to me came out of nowhere. It was the harvest of seeds they've been planting for years. The small choices that taught them image was worth more than people, until abandoning a dying baby felt easier than admitting they'd rather attend a brunch. That's the thing about how we treat each other. Every cold reply, every thumbs up where a phone call should have been, every story we tell to make ourselves the hero of something shameful. It all adds up. My mother in law didn't wake up one morning and decide to be cruel. She just practiced choosing appearances over honesty so many times that she couldn't feel the difference anymore. And by the time Posey was fighting for her life, the lie came to her faster than the love did. What saved me wasn't luck. When Eamon walked in and asked if I had the texts, I realized the difference between us and them came down to three things I'd been building without even knowing it. The first was simply refusing to become what they were. I could have lied right back, could have screamed, could have torn that family apart with their own weapons. I didn't, because I wanted Posey to grow up watching her mother stay decent even when decency cost something. The second was learning to think instead of just feeling. Lord knows I felt plenty sitting on that chapel floor at 3 in the morning. But Eamon taught me that anger without a plan is just noise. We didn't burn anything down. We saved every screenshot, we kept every timestamp, and we let the truth speak in a quiet room where no one could twist it. The calmest person in the room really is the one with the power. And the third was the plain stubbornness to keep standing up. 5 weeks of sleeping in a family lounge, 15 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, 100 mornings where giving up would have been so much easier. I kept showing up for Posey because that's what she needed, and somewhere in all those impossible nights, the showing up became who I am. I'm not telling you this so you'll hate the people who failed me. I'm telling you because the same forces are at work in your life right now, quietly, in the small choices nobody's watching. Build the kind of character that won't betray you when it gets hard. Keep your mind clear enough to see what's actually happening. And find the grit to stay on your feet one more day. Do that, and when your 3 in the morning comes, and it will come for all of us, you'll have something real to stand on. I did. And she's 2 now, obsessed with the ocean, and she will never once doubt who showed up.